Welcome to the 5th episode of Ericsson's 5G Talks. Today we'll explore how to unlock the value of 5G by exposing your network to access APIs. There is huge potential for 5G to create the next generation of mobile applications, which in turn will drive new revenue streams for telco operators as technology develops and consumers' connectivity expectations increase. One of the best ways to do this is by exposing 5G networks to give developers more access. Unlocking the APIs or application programming interfaces can help to accelerate improvements in existing applications, create innovative new ones, and open up revenue streams for telcos to channel in the marketplace. So for telco operators, it's a win-win situation, as any new revenues can be used to offset further 5G investment and network growth. We'll also talk about Quality On-Demand APIs, or QoD, and how this could potentially be the biggest innovation opportunity within a decade or more. I'm Angela Lamont, and today I'm joined by Hans Hamar, Head of Networks Business Strategy at Ericsson, and Joachim Sorellis, Head of Global Network Platform Product and Engineering. Later on, we'll also be joined by Diego Aguiar, Director of Operations at Telefónica Vivo, who's leading an open gateway initiative in Brazil, and Peter Arbiter, SVP Magenta API Capability Exposure at Deutsche Telekom, to tell us how they're already unlocking APIs to accelerate new revenue and innovation. And remember, the Ericsson team is ready right now to answer any burning questions you might have. Just tell us your thoughts in the chat window. So, Joachim, what exactly is an API, and what does it mean to expose a network?
So an API, an application programmable interface, is really a tool for one software application to talk to or use services from another software application. So in terms of network APIs, think about an SMS that you receive from a dentist reminding you about an appointment that you have, or a 6-digit code that you get from a website when you try to log in. All these are actually network APIs called by a software application. So a network API really is a way to access capabilities in a mobile network. And the software developers do that through simple API calls, application interface calls into the network. So that's really what it's about, to expose a network API.
So Joachim, we've spoken about what innovations are possible with 5G, but what difference will exposing the networks make to consumers and enterprises?
Well, this is really a transformative time for most enterprises. Most of them are in the process of digitizing their operations, both for efficiency, but also to get a better connection and better experience for their customers, for the consumers. Now, the consumers themselves, they're also looking to take charge and personalize their interaction with the customers. So basically, both sides are trying to gain something. And network APIs have been available previously in the form of SMSs or voice or video calls. But the 5G networks, they contain so much more, so many more capabilities. And when the enterprises can use these more advanced capabilities, they can really enhance their services, enhance their interaction with the consumers, with their customers. And not only that, they can also create new applications that wouldn't have been possible before. So this is really an important trend for them, and the Vonage communication platform is doing exactly that. It can add network APIs to the existing APIs that they have today, and also Ericsson, as a vendor of telco equipment, we can make the networks ready to actually enable this exposure. And trust me, all enterprises will have to go through this journey at some point or other. In the next decade, most enterprises will actually start to use the mobile networks in a fundamentally different way from they have done before. So it's really a big, big trend.
So Hans, would you say that now's the right time to increase network exposure and give the developers more access?
Yeah, I think right now is the right time. And I think if we look at this from 3 different perspectives, first of all, telco's business, mobile broadband, has reached its full potential. So there is an eagerness and willingness to move on from mobile broadband best effort into what we call differentiated guaranteed performance. Secondly, the networks, 5G has been built since 2019. The networks are out there. We have launched more than 140 networks. So the networks are getting ready. And the third one, the technology now with API exposure we have talked about, but also technologies that we have already launched with which we have talked about in earlier episodes, URSP, performance level, this guaranteed performance in the networks. It all comes together now, and now is the time to take that next step to drive further innovation in the applications.
Joachim, what do telco operators stand to gain from unlocking their network APIs?
Well, we all know that the telcos really need to find new ways to monetize their network investments, the huge investments they made in 5G networks. Now, the API business in itself, it's quite a sizable business. We expect it to grow to some $20 billion in the next few years and grow very, very rapidly. So that's a welcome revenue stream in itself. But the most important thing here is that this enables the start of seeing the networks as more programmable, as more performance-based, if you would like, beyond traditional mobile broadband that we have today. And it's really by unlocking that potential, by providing a more predictable service, because that is what applications in the future are going to need. They're going to need a predictable service in terms of latency, speed, and reliability. So by starting to unlocking that potential, that is a much, much bigger potential than just the API business itself. And this is really what it's about for the telco operators long term.
Hans, do you think that customers would be prepared to pay more for enhanced network experiences?
Yeah, it's quite clear, I think, from our Consumer Lab report. We see that consumers are prepared to pay around 11% more for a more predictable and user experience. So I think that's in place. I think when it comes to better performance and better, not just being better best effort, actually predictable performance or guaranteed performance even for certain types of applications, I think there are another potential here. Not only that consumers or users see the benefit of that, but actually ASPs or application service providers, they see benefit to provide that predictable performance. And that will open up for new business models for telcos. So rather than just selling the subscription to consumers and enterprises, they can sell the APIs to application developers, and the application developer will then give an opportunity for users to maybe use a specific type of service in the application, not related to the performance, but you don't pay for the performance as an end user, you pay for actually using the application. An example would be gaming. If you play single player, you don't really need that low latency. If you play multiplayer, then low latency is critical, otherwise you will lose the game and everyone on your team would not be happy. So in that case, you might pay to play multiplayer, but you also automatically call for an API. The application calls for an API in the network that gives you that low latency, and you can play the game. You pay for an hour on the spot, and you can play the game, and hopefully you'll win. So that is another, like, probably bigger opportunity, the changing business models for telcos and the application developer ecosystem.
Now, we mentioned quality on demand earlier. Do you think that there's opportunities here and potential for growth?
Yeah, I think there's a significant potential for growth. And I mean, these performance levels or enhanced predictable performance will be sold by telcos in different ways as subscriptions. I think the subscription model has a good potential. It will not grow like double the revenues for telcos. The APIs exposing APIs and the quality on demand, that has a different potential. I think significant bigger potential. You are, as an end user, you will consume these APIs in the moment when you actually need a better connectivity for a certain application. You don't know that you need a better connectivity, but you need to use a certain part of the application, some features there. And then you pay out of your pocket money rather than your budget. So pay more for a subscription on the 2-year. You need to consider your budget. If you pay in the moment when you're actually going to use something in an application, you pay $1 or even less for an hour. That's a completely different decision for a person. So and these API calls on quality demand will grow massively when they start to be used by the application developers, and we get scale on this. So I think that's the biggest potential for telcos.
And how do telcos allow exposure to QOD APIs?
Yeah, so first of all, it's about building the network with predictable performance. And it's not only predictable performance for one type of service. You need to provide that for the low latency one, the high bandwidth services, and of course you need to have the mobile broadband best effort performance level, as we say, or slice from an end-to-end point of view. So having that in the network, you can either sell those performance levels as subscriptions, or you can expose them as APIs. So all sorts of applications that will demand low latency will go through the same slice in the network or performance level. And if CSPs or telcos are building the networks with good coverage, with the low band NR, you need to have TDD mid-band, and of course standalone and 5G core, then you can enable application developers to start to innovate new things that is not, available today. They can improve a lot of existing applications, of course, but the big potential is actually entrepreneurs starting to innovate on top of what's available today.
We've talked about a market, an opportunity of unlocking APIs, both in immediate revenue from developers and longer-term willingness to pay more from consumers. So now let's explore the application of this 5G technology and how exposing networks through global network platforms can create real value for telco operators and their customers. We'll hear from Deutsche Telekom about their first global commercial partnership and why this strategy is so central to their business. And explore a current user case example with Telefónica Vivo in Brazil and how this has improved an existing app experience for their customers. I'm joined by Peter Arbiter of Deutsche Telekom, one of the first networks to make their APIs available commercially. Thanks for joining us today, Peter. Now, your network is the very foundation of your company, and by opening it up, how are you creating ways for your customers and developers to generate value?
So first of all, we had already opened up that network in the past when we entered the CPaaS business, but we just did that on the wholesale side. And what we've now changed and what's now new is that we also now tackle that CPaaS market on the retail side, but we also are now entering the market of the network APIs. So as said, we started CPaaS wholesale side. We've enlarged it into 2 directions, retail as well as network APIs.
So APIs are a key focus for Deutsche Telekom. Where do you see most of the potential in that?
Yeah, actually we are at the beginning of a journey. So I don't know what will happen in 3, 4, 5 years of now. And it reminds me of former days when we talked about 3G and 4G and we'd ask ourselves what the killer's app might be. So this is somehow similar to the start of that kind of journey we are in. So I can talk about what we have started with, and there we see on the one side like these use cases where we get additional information out of our network, And there are the use cases where we access additional functionality. So if we look at the first ones again, where we get additional information, there we find some use cases where it's all about verification, authentication, either in these kind of banking spaces, but also age verification for the gaming industry is a hot topic. Then there are, in terms of information, these cases where we do some tracking, like tracking of a drone or tracking of a device to ensure that it's really there where we expect it to be there, in front of an ATM, for example, and not somewhere else. So these are the kind of tracking use cases. And if we look at that second group where we get additional functionality, there one of the hardest ones is provisioning a slice. So provisioning a different performance of the network, what is also called slicing and quality on demand from its API.
And for someone who's not an expert, can you describe the Magenta Business API?
Actually, it comes with, as you said, magenta with that color, so that's Deutsche Telekom. Then business means we are selling that to business customers. Even if these are B2B2C use cases, our focus is to first look at the first B part. So that could be either enterprises, as said earlier, by pursuing now that retail motion, but it could also be the wholesale motion where we then look at aggregators. Aggregators, and they could be, again, aggregators like the well-known CPaaS players, but also hyperscalers, system integrators, software developers. So that's the business part. And then we talk about APIs. So what is an API? An application program interface. So this is the way how software talks to each other. And in that particular case, some software, some code wants to talk to our network and wants to get that additional information I just talked about. And this is all about it. So it's Magenta, it's us, it's business, and it's an interface to our network.
And what's the differentiator in comparison to other aggregators?
So first of all, let's be clear. We actually do not want to differentiate that much. It sounds probably weird, but we would like to ensure that the entire telco industry moves alongside that path. So there is no value if there was just that super duper great API from Deutsche Telekom, which just can be accessed in our network for our customers. So what software wants to limit itself to just talk to that number of people then? And this is why we need to ensure that the entire telco industry moves alongside. We need to ensure that not only one aggregator pursues that path, that the entire industry, that all aggregators are entering that new business. Still, there will be some differentiation, and we as Deutsche Telekom have the beautiful setup that we operate in the Americas, we operate in Europe. That's probably then part of a differentiation when it comes up to the network coverage. But the functionality itself has to be built in the entire industry.
And as we've got you here, can we have a sneak peek of some of the first use cases that you're going to launch?
Yeah, we did launch at our Digital X Fair in September last year. We did launch the first APIs, the first network APIs. We were really proud to have been the first telco which did that on a global basis. So quality on demand, for example, was one, but we also have to acknowledge that the network has to be ready to really scale out that API. So we did somehow a soft launch. We started to test it with the first customers, and this is again all about this additional functionality. And there, the first use cases we pursued was those cameras. The beautiful cameras here. I mean, these are stable here, but what if it was a mobile camera team? And in the past, they had like 10 SIM cards. And or actually they had 2 times 10, our 10 SIM cards and then competition 10 SIM cards, and they try to upload the data through these 10 SIM cards by somehow bundling that capacity. In the future, and this is what we have started last year in September, they book this API, and with that they get that better performance in our network. And with that, they no longer need 10 SIM cards, they just need one and a slice. So that was quality on demand. We also did quite some APIs all around the device and information about the device. The status, is it roaming, is it on, but also the location. So where do I find that device? And that goes back to my tracking case I mentioned earlier, drone tracking, for example. But an even much more interesting case is in the media industry, by ensuring that you just broadcast your content to a region where you've got the license for. And in these days, we do have the challenge that with VPNs, you can easily overcome this setup. In the future with our API, it's much easier and better and more secure for the content providers. So that had been the first set of APIs we launched.
So I'm feeling like that very soon there's going to be the Ericsson 5G Talks live roaming mobile version. Any other sneak peeks of exciting use cases coming up in 2024?
Yeah, sure. So actually, as said, we are not doing that by ourselves. We are doing this as the entire industry, and to organize ourselves, we have found the Camara initiatives like 2 years ago, where currently we have more than 300 companies joining. This is an open source project, so it's available and everyone can look at what's next to come. And there are like 50 APIs which are discussed. So these 50, and probably not all of them, but at least some of them, you will see being launched in the next quarters. And for Mobile World Congress, we're gonna launch a few more, which is then all around these authentication and verification use cases I talked about. Things like know your customer, SIM swap as some a number verification, as 3 APIs which we're gonna launch, and it's no secret because it's open source and everyone can have a look at that.
So it sounds as though the next episode of Ericsson 5G Talks should be live, roaming and mobile. But what can we expect from the next wave of use cases in 2024?
So we had just launched last year at our Digital X Fair, the first 3, where we did quality on demand, where we did the device information, device status, for example. Now at MWC, we launched the next 3, which was all around SIM swap, KYC, know your customer, and number verification. So honestly, while there are even 50 more to come, and in Camara, where we are not alone, together with 300 companies, we are defining the next 50 APIs. I'm actually not looking at the next 4, 5, 6, 7. I would like to ensure that these 6 now really drive business forward, because there's a lot of things we can now do with those. So there will be some more. There will be like age verification. There will be probably QOD in the home network. But as said, I'd like to also within Deutsche Telekom now focus to make these first 6 successful.
So from an operational point of view, how is Deutsche Telekom enabling itself to be ready for network API, the journey that you're on right now?
Yeah, we did start a few years ago in a project organization to get that done where we were at Digital X last year. And then we realized that probably now when it comes to execution, it's now really important to leave that project organization behind and build up a line organization all around that. And this is what we did. So we had built a new organizational form which covers the retail side, the wholesale side, the CPaaS world, the network APIs. And this is something what we are now driving forward. Now this new organization consists of sales activities, product management, commercially and technically, and then also the operational piece. And with that, having that in one hand, we try to get to that speed, what we now need to get to drive the execution.
And how is Ericsson and Vonage helping you as a business partner to drive the network API business to success?
You really help us a lot. So on the one side, you've got the Vonage team, and they are the experts of CPaaS. And I just mentioned that before. that we have now started to enter the retail world. So we are doing that using the Vonage platform. So we colored it in beautiful magenta. This is where the Magenta Business API comes from. So we are using the Vonage platform in a magenta version, and that allows us to enter the CPaaS market. And from the Ericsson side, not only that you help us out by equipping now our network with the functionality, we are also intensively working together with your G&P platform team. And this is then talking about the network API side of the house, where we jointly have started to drive forward with that new journey.
Thank you for that, Peter. Like you said, the network APIs have been available for a while, but now the 5G networks, the 4G networks, the mobile networks contain so many more capabilities, and those are the ones that we together are trying to expose in forms of network APIs. And Deutsche Telekom and you yourself have been a front runner into this, and you have been leading both Ericsson and Vonage in this journey, and together I think we have achieved great things. So thank you so much for that partnership.
And it's great to see how Deutsche Telekom are really leading the way in 5G and helping to make standardized APIs available internationally. And now I'd like to explore how exposing network capabilities via APIs can be a catalyst for new opportunities to monetize 5G and look at a specific application of this technology in the Brazilian mobile industry. Now, in November last year, the Brazilian mobile industry announced the launches of 3 anti-fraud network services and became a pioneer for GSMA Open Gateway. We spoke with Diego Aguiar, who's a Director of Operations at Telefónica Tech and leads the initiative at Telefónica Vivo Brazil about the potential of this initiative. Now, Vivo has been recognised for some years as a digital ecosystem in B2B especially. Revenues from digital solutions are growing. How do you see this impact of the possibility of exposing network capabilities in this ecosystem?
Telecom companies by nature invest massively on our communication networks and central systems to mainly support the traditional connectivity and service that we usually offer to the market. In addition to these services, other capabilities have great potential for use, and we at Vivo, we have been exploring those capabilities, such as advanced and differentiated services developed on this structure. So especially on B2B, we have been doing that for the last, I would say, 5 to 6 years. Some examples are like digital service validation and anti-fraud services and on-demand network quality. Those are examples of digital solutions built on these capabilities and exposed to standardized APIs, not just in Brazil, but around the world when we speak about the Telefónica group itself. And I do believe that this type of approach expands the range of services and application that can be developed by companies of any size in the market, providing new lines of service that was not previously explored by telecom companies. And we at Vivo, we are pioneering on this approach by standardize those APIs to the Brazilian market.
Now, Brazil was a pioneer in the launch of multi-operator APIs, prioritizing anti-fraud APIs. What was the driver for this prioritization, and what are the main use cases for these interfaces?
Well, that's a great point. Brazil records a high number of digital banking transactions. According to some recent research did by Febraban, 77% of the transactions in Brazil in 2023 were carried out through digital channels such as mobile banking and internet banking, corresponding to more or less 125 billion transactions. However, as consumers become digital, the challenge to prevent fraud and scams also arise, which cause harm to consumers and institutions, affect credibility and service satisfaction indicators. In this context, Vivo offers services that help institutions in validating information related to the final customer digital identity. From the creation of the digital banking account itself to the transactions, so completing the whole ecosystem. A great example of this use is the number verification API for silent validation and authentication process of a customer, using their phone number without the need to send auxiliary codes. This type of approach simplifies the customer journey onboarding process by eliminating friction and restricting possibility for social engineering practices.
Now, we've been talking about the challenges of monetizing 5G for some time. How does the Open Gateway Initiative address this challenge?
The Open Gateway Initiative basic principle is to make telecom companies' network capabilities available to the market in a standardized and digital way. The main beneficiaries of these ecosystems are market companies of any size or vertical, which will be able to consume this service in a simplified way throughout those APIs. But something interesting to say, and usually we do not think about that in the first glance, is that Open Gateway or those services exposed throughout APIs are another useful way to monetize the 5G network. And I think this is interesting because it differentiates itself from other, I would say, common examples of how we're going to monetize the 5G networks. New services like that will bring benefit to the society from a large company or a startup, mainly over a community of developers. And this is what Vivo believes. And it seems like it's also a sort of what Vonage has been doing, potentialized by its huge developers community. This approach syncs with Vivo purpose, and I believe in some way also syncs with Ericsson and also Vonage purpose as well. So to me, it makes completely sense to address the market throughout Open Gateway.
Thank you, Diego. It's clear how these 5G applications add value to things like digital security and how they can create new revenue for developers and telco operators too. And with more developers gaining access to 5G's full capabilities through standardized APIs, it opens up limitless opportunities. And I'd like to explore that more now with our experts from Ericsson. So Joachim, why do you believe API-enabled telcos will be so much better placed for the future?
Clearly, like Hans discussed and mentioned before, it's definitely a need for telcos to find new business models so that we actually pay for what the applications really need. And the API business is a foundation for that. If you're early out, of course, this exponential growth in the API business that we talked about before, those operators that have that will, of course, be best placed to monetize that quickly and lay the foundation for the future, which is the performance-based networks that we talked about. Now, Vonage and Ericsson, we have all the assets ready to scale and to make this available today. So by telcos really exposing network APIs early, they will be at the forefront of this journey.
And what kinds of services and use cases are we likely to see as a result?
One part of this will be enhancements of use cases that we already have today. For example, with quality on demand or quality of service combined with a video use case, consumers can really get a much better experience. But 5G networks contain so much more than SMS, voice, and video. It contains security, like we heard talking about here from Diego. It contains quality of service. It contains location capabilities. So it's really an endless possibility for new use cases in those areas. And I must be the first to admit that we probably don't know exactly which use cases will be the dominant one. But providing developers with all these capabilities, all this choice, and all these possibilities will for sure spur a lot of innovation.
And what developers are already big users of APIs?
Well, it is said that 90% of all developers uses API in some form, and many of them actually use network APIs, as we've talked about, the SMS, the voice, and the video that exist today. So these ones that use network APIs in their applications, like call center applications or customer care applications to remind us about our appointments. They will probably be the first ones to start to use the more advanced network APIs that 5G can bring. But in general, all developers benefits from APIs. They make it so simple to communicate from one application to another, and now from one application to the mobile networks. So for sure, over time, all developers will use this. And the ones that start to use it early, they will of course be really, really well placed to get a better interaction with their consumers and create new applications that generate new revenue for them.
Now, to illustrate this point, we have a short film from BASF. Abhijit Sharma from BASF, a chemical company with a dedication to climate protection and sustainability, will show just how leveraging the power of Vonage APIs can help you build more intelligent, intuitive customer engagements across multiple channels.
Farmers are perhaps the only solution currently we have as a humanity in terms of fixing things with the planet or climate action. It's becoming more and more evident that we need to take some action, and that action is basically resting in the hands of farmers. One of the key projects that we ran was this disease warning project in Egypt, through which we thought that we would reach out to farmers via WhatsApp. They can also share information such as their geolocation, and once we get their locational information, our systems are running behind the scenes to provide satellite-based disease warning. So there is a two-way communication channel right now which is really effective, and through which we are able to reach a chunk of tomato growers around the Nile Delta region. I feel that there is a lot more that we can do with these kind of APIs. We are currently at a very low level of scale in relation to the number of farmers on this planet. So there exists a huge opportunity in terms of broadening this solution while also making deeper and more meaningful connections at the same time. We are definitely interested in exploring the possibilities of network APIs further with Ericsson and Vonage. I know Ericsson as a company, and it has always been an innovation and invention-driven company. And from my vantage point, I see this collaboration with Vonage as perhaps bringing out more advancements to product services that wouldn't have been possible before. And location is part of this, as well as the Web 3.0, blockchain, and AI. At the same time, there's also developments happening within the world of augmented reality, virtual reality. Right now, there's a big gap in the marketplace, and I expect that Vonage and Ericsson will gradually move towards solving those problems.
Hans, with its openness and programmability, how can a 5G network act as a service enabler?
Yeah, I think programmability of networks are coming in two different dimensions, you can say. First of all, we have talked about the APIs consuming network resources through like application programmable interfaces. So that's one way of looking at it, and that's enabled by the 5G network, 5G core network with slicing. The other dimension is really the network in itself that can be programmed by the telco to deliver those different performance levels or slices. So this that we are opening up the networks now to be programmable have multiple dimensions for both application developers and telcos to how they operate the network and deliver this differentiated performance.
So Hans, with its openness and programmability, how can a 5G network act as a key service enabler?
Yeah, so when we are building the new like slices and performance levels, which are enabled by 5G core and the RAN new radio, then programmability comes in two different flavors, you can say. First of all, the programmability from an application developer point of view, that you use the APIs to access the correct resources in the network, but also programmability for the telco, that I can actually program the network to deliver the performance levels with the right capacity and of course the right performance. So that like comes together with programmability in these two different dimensions.
Joachim, why are standardized Camara APIs so critical to success, and what verticals are already benefiting from them?
Well, this is all about scale. So a developer cannot know when they write their application which phone and to which operating telco this phone is connected to when the user opens the application. So he has to assume that the APIs that we're talking about work the same regardless of which user is using them, which telco is being connected to that user, which country that user is in. So it really has to be a global thing, right? And there has to be some standardization to ensure this. And aggregating and normalizing APIs to make sure that they are the same everywhere, that is what aggregators such as Vonage are doing with their cloud communications platform. Now, to make that aggregation and normalization economically scalable and viable, there has to be some commonality between the different telcos. So a telco in one country has to expose APIs in pretty much the same way as a telco in another country. And this type of harmonization has been very, very successful over the last 2 or 3 decades with SMS, for example. And now Camara is trying to achieve the exact same alignment and exact same standardization, but in an accelerated fashion for the new network APIs. And like Peter also mentioned here earlier, there are already a large number of these APIs being standardized, and maybe 10 or so of them are ready for developers to use. And you find those developers in almost any vertical. You know, it can be e-commerce, it can be social media, it can be fintech, retail, logistics, you name it. It can be any type of vertical. All types of applications can benefit from these APIs. And these developers are already experimenting with these first 10 or so, and we have seen in Mobile Congress that several of them have been launched with major telcos already.
Well, it's certainly an exciting time for 5G right now, with the freedom that developers will have to create new innovations. So I think that's a great place to end. But if you are eager to ask our experts more about 5G network exposure and its potential for new 5G innovation, well, they're right here, and they will be answering your questions for the next 30 minutes. So please keep those coming in the chat window. Thanks to all our guests today, Hans Hamar and Joachim Sorelius, Peter Arbiter and Diego Aguiar, and of course all of you for taking the time to join us today. I'll see you next time.